then we can definitely look into not using the phones or not using the radios. Our radios also allow us to scan other than just kilowatt as well. So as long as the phones can do all of that, and we can get that to Beach Patrol, because it's all of their, essentially, we would have to buy, I guess, that, sign them up that they're part of our code enforcement piece, then yes, we can switch
Obviously,
all to phones.
we have to achieve functional objectives.
We do. So as long as we can still talk to the sheriff's office, as long as we can still get dispatch, if we can do all those things on a cell phone.
But even
with
assuming
ease.
all those things, even if it's less than $12,000, I can't imagine how much electronics is necessary. What is involved in that
Right.
to necessitate anything more than $1,000? I literally I
Right,
can't.
well, we'll meet with our Barrier Island Ocean Rescue. I know Craig will talk to them. We'll make sure we talk to dispatch, we'll talk to the sheriffs. We'll have all that conversation, because if we can essentially move and it seems feasible and it works, I can't see why not doing it. It saves money. We just need to make sure that the fire department, that we're all able to talk to each other if we just move to the cell phone service.
And the mayor said functional. I was thinking the same thing, operational effectiveness. If we can save a few pennies, but the operational effectiveness goes down, maybe it's not worth being penny wise and pound foolish. So
I agree with that. The delta between the cost of a top-end cell phone versus this radio is potentially fairly substantial.
yep. No,
And the cell phone's provided as a FirstNet subscriber, right?
I'm sorry?
The cell phone, we don't pay for the cell phone with FirstNet, do we?
So the cell phones were $1 for that particular, that's why everyone got 15, because they were $1. If we would choose different models, they would cost a little bit, but, and they.
Which is fine. 15 is
Yeah, I
fine.
think everyone
15s,
was
we don't
happy
need the
with it.
16.
Yes, and it's $45 monthly service.
So there's no capital cost.
okay. If that works, that sounds like a much better solution.
So anyway, we
But
will
we'll come
continue to
back with that.
explore this over the course of the month.
So yeah,
If you want to pull me into those discussions, I can help navigate that.
I'll have something this week from them, so we can start that, and I'll be happy to share.
Thank you.
So can I ask questions, or you have more you want to talk about? Or
No, well, I mean, I think question would be best, because we had the overview last time, and if you had a chance to review the budget and look a little closer to it, I'll be happy to answer.
So just maybe a couple of philosophical questions to start with. And Mr. Mayor, we talked about this briefly, but we are, in this budget, we are still paying capital costs out of our operating budget. Why would we not just move over to a capital budget and an operating budget? How do you think about that?
Generally, that's how one would do things, fund capital investments out of capital reserves. The philosophy that, as I understand it, that has heretofore guided budgeting decisions of the town is to be extraordinarily conservative and build up reserves. And it has been in fact true, other than with regard to the building of this facility, that the town has had the ability to fund what would be considered capital projects out of operating revenues. And we still are essentially able to do that, other than particularly large ones. Anything other than very, very large capital expenses, we are still generating operational surpluses.
And also how we report, it's on the accrual modify basis, which capital expenditures are pretty much like cash expenditures showing on the financial statement, not like in a business world, you capitalize them and amortize them. So it's a little different and shows that we, like Mayor said, we can to use our operating budgets to do that.
Yeah, I would like you to think about that, because our capital fund is substantial enough where we could draw on the capital fund. And I know it's just which pot, we get a lot of money, it's just which pot. It just seems like a better discipline to think about it like that.
And I want to be cautious in characterizing all our reserves as capital reserves. because I don't want to limit our, flexibility in utilizing those dollars for a legitimate public purpose to benefit the community. So we've talked in the past, for example, about acquisitions of property for conservation purposes, not really a classic capital project. But nonetheless, that might be an appropriate use of accumulated reserves. We've mapped out essentially a placeholder for a couple of large capital projects, one of which is not even that large, is repaving of a mile of Beachwalker Drive. We need to do more assessment, and this would be the Infrastructure and Public Works Committee, as to what has been proposed in the past to raise portions of Kiowa Island Parkway, particularly around Mingo Point. It was the prior conclusion of a prior council that assessed that a few years ago, that was not, in a sense, money that needed to be spent relative to the incidence of nuisance flooding. Obviously, there's been some additional sea level rise, and that's another assessment we need to take. The only other large capital project, substantial capital project that's on the horizon is with regard to this new wing, and we've essentially allocated, we've noted you can pay that out of state accommodations tax dollars, and we've allocated essentially, this would be in your province, Mr. Chairman, to work on a bond issuance, but that could be repaid over a period of time, and we've kind of just used a placeholder for $1 million a year to defease that.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I know what the budget number is. It's 49 million if you total up all of the different funds we have. I'd just like us to think about kind of a little bit better discipline in terms of capital projects, understanding the cash accounting method versus accrual method, and understanding the history. I think we can document how we move money around, and it might provide some better transparency.
And would funds that we get through grants perhaps be allocated appropriately between capital and the other fund? Like, I was thinking about the path out there that we're discussing with the county and state.
So if I may, there's a couple ways to think about that. One, you can take the money out of like a accommodation tax plan, or you can take the accommodation tax, other than maybe state, and move it to the capital plan and allocate it out of the capital budget. So the money's fungible. It's just how do you want to just book it, and where you want to book it, and do we have any controlled discipline around it? And that's the thing where I'm ultimately going, is kind of the controlled discipline.
Well, what Councilmember Spencer raised an interesting point. There are also these unbudgeted sources of revenue, which is, in this case, we've applied for a grant from the county that I don't think we had actually budgeted the receipt of those funds.
No, we have not.
And so that is going to cover the entire cost of the leisure trail project that's upcoming, that we can discuss briefly at the meeting this afternoon. That may still be true with regard to some or all of the cost associated with extending leisure trail or sidewalks along Betsy Carson Parkway as well.
And also, just going back to this capital fund and the fund balance in there, this is on my horizon to do it sometime this calendar year, not fiscal, the reserve study that will help us, establish or maybe define those reserve levels that the council feel comfortable with. And then, with that, we'll know how much of it is spendable, or what we want to keep it for that too.
Yeah, and part of my thinking, Mr. Mayor, is we lay out kind of a 10-year plan for capital expenditures. If it's in the capital budget versus in the general budget, then you can see your visibility going out 10 years. And according to my new training that the administrators helped me with, they recommend having a capital plan going out 5 to 10 years.
Well, I believe it's actually a kind of a requirement to actually have a capital improvement plan as part of the comprehensive plan. We have not been as rigorous in that regard as probably we could be. But again, I would note that part of the reason for that is that our financial position is extraordinarily anomalous relative to, I think, probably any other municipality perhaps in the country, but certainly in South Carolina, in that, as we've discussed before, most municipalities certainly simply do not carry don't have large reserves. They have typically what GFOA recommends 6 months
Yeah.
of operating reserves to cover unexpected things. But because, again, two reasons. One, ultimately you have leverage you can pull to increase revenues. Two, you can always borrow money, municipality can borrow money. But third, and perhaps most importantly, the reason you don't do that is people would feel they're overtaxed currently if the revenues that are being generated aren't spent on current services.
No.
So.
Just another philosophical question. In the local accommodations tax budget, we pulled out all of the expenditures from last year, including salaries, FICA, insurance, retirement. What was the philosophical approach to pulling it out of the local accommodation tax?
So what we've done in the past, we were thinking that partially we can fund public safety director's salary and arts council group from that fund, but we changed the gears this year, and the 100% of arts council is not funded from or will be funded once approved from state accommodation tax. And by analyzing the statute a little closer in detail, we found that that shouldn't be funded from accommodation taxes. It should be funded from general fund, the public safety.
This reflects some direction that I had given based upon reviewing the revenue ruling guidance 98, I think it's 9822, but also various AG opinions and talking to the Municipal Association of South Carolina, that salaries can be paid in part out of accommodations taxes, whether local or state, but that should only be with regard to those additional costs associated with additional needs related to your tourist activity. And the simple example was if just a public safety director or police director, you're going to have that person regardless of the amount of tourism. So it would be inappropriate to deduct or allocate any of the cost of that particular salary. If you determined that the only reason you would have a second code enforcement, you would have additional code enforcement officer is to handle short-term rental compliance and or other compliance, then you could start allocating those, and that's kind of on that 70 to 30 ratio basis.
And so, did I hear you correctly said this all went from local accommodation expense to state accommodation?
No, not all of it. No, to general fund.
Some of it we just determined that, not saying that that what the town had done previously was necessarily incorrect in any way, but simply made a policy decision, which I believe is more consistent with the guidance that we've read with regard to allocation of accommodations taxes as it pertains to salaries.
So I apologize. Where did it go?
A general fund.
General fund. Okay, that's what I was, sorry. And then you did not take out turtle patrol or beach supply costs. That made sense to me. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then down, so staying with local accommodation tax, but I could ask this question about all of them. There's a transfer to the capital fund, and then there's an increase in the fund balance. What determined the amount you transferred to the general fund or the capital fund?
So
Is there a ratio, or what was the philosophy about?
any work that we're doing, any beautification or enhancements on Beachwalker or Kiowa Parkway, we're doing it for tourists, experience too. So we justify that the work that will be done on those two roads and is can be paid from the accommodation taxes.
Okay, and your note says 50% of the cost for the road improvements
Yes.
to the general fund, and then 20% for beach renourishment.
So,
And that goes to the capital fund. if I'm-
correct.
yeah.
So that's another thing. It's a policy that was set by the council years ago, that 20% of hospitality tax and local accommodation tax revenues are automatically transferred to capital and emergency funds for future either, weather events for emergency funds or future road improvements or.
It is a policy decision. We're not bound by that prior policy decision in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And the question is kind of where do you put, how do you characterize those reserves? They are still restricted funds.
Correct.
And when we say we've allocated it to beach.
Capital fund.
Capital funds or beach renourishment, I don't believe there is any legal requirement those funds necessarily be spent for those purposes. We can't bind a future council. The council can make a decision. The capital, even though we characterize it as a capital fund, the money's there because they come from accommodations or hospitality taxes. It could only be utilized for the purposes that are otherwise permitted pursuant to those enabling statutes.
Okay.
And they're pretty similar, hospitality tax and local accommodation, as far as how they could be spent. And I also have a detail, so which fund comes to, or, funds this fund. So if anything, once we're going to use it, we have a good backup.
Dorota, remind me, I don't have it in front of me, but the list of permitted expenditures under the enabling statutes of hospitality and local accommodations tax are fairly similar.
Yes.
And they are also similar, although not quite as similar, to the state accommodations tax.
Yes.
There is at least one area which I believe, there are a couple things.
Flooding mitigation
control
is for hospitality tax that could be used for flooding mitigation.
that is not in the state, not explicitly in the state accommodations tax statute. And the other thing, of course, is there is not the temporal restriction on
2 years.
on those two as there is on the state accommodations tax.
Okay. There was one other one. Bear with me 1 second, please. Oh, on the county accommodation tax is where we used to pay beach patrol costs.
So partially. So what we have done in the past, we funded 70% from state tax and the remaining 30% from county. So what we have done this time,
Took $584,000 and it's been moved out of county.
correct, to fund the difference from whatever state tax didn't fund. That's what we've done in the past.
So where is it being paid for? Is it all out of state tax now?
Yes.
Because there was no state tax, that was the other issue I had, was there was no state tax breakdown in the sheet that I have.
We should, I need to take a good question, Dorota. So we previously, I thought the decision was always beach patrol was subject to that was kind of the additional service, municipal service, so it was subject
Yes.
to the percentage allocation under the state accommodations tax, but then you use the residual could be funded out of another accommodations tax.
Let's see, so the breakdown under the state accommodation tax, with the county.
Okay.
Then this is what I'm talking about, Mr. Mayor. See that 584 disappeared.
Which page are we? The page number's on mine. His doesn't have page numbers.
The county accommodation, it's near it's like third.
Local.
Before local.
Before local. Yeah,
Okay, so 70% right now is funded from SATAX and the rest from general fund.
So why did we decide not to do the remainder this time? Remind me of our discussion.
I think it was just like through our discussion that we only 70% going to fund from the SATAX and the rest from general fund, like other, like the same thing with the deputies, like all the public safety that that's what I took from my
because
discussion.
there is not the additional, there's not a line item under the local accommodations tax that would support.
Correct,
That's
that
right.
was supportive of it. So that's why we,
Well, the county doesn't have.
they don't have their own ordinance, but
No.
they follow the state ordinance from the local accommodation tax and hospitality taxes. So we decided, because it wasn't listed specifically as a public safety expenditure, we decided to move it to general fund.
Be conservative.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And I have this, the detail that I can share probably from you if you want to look at what are we going to fund, because we do have a little more aggressive approach to funding from SATAX. So I'll be happy to share the detail what's.
Well, let me back up just a little bit. So don't get me wrong, the being more aggressive or more conservative, or however you think, we're going in the right direction. I love the direction we're going.
I didn't say wrong.
I'm not sure I would quite use the term more aggressive.
Yeah, exactly, whichever.
But consistent with the, again, guidance in the state attorney general's opinions. In other words, that there should be an expansive reading of the state accommodations tax in order to achieve the intended objectives of promoting and or providing for tourism.
I think the way I think of it, it's a better triage, how we're spending the money going forward. So I applaud all this. I'm just trying, it was a lot of numbers here, and I'm trying to just understand philosophically what we're doing.
And again, it's raised a host of issues relative to, how the town has done things in the past and how the town is determined and under prior administrations and prior councils, statutory language. Again, is all I can say is we've spent a fair amount of time looking at any kind of relevant guidance out there and trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of promoting the town's interest in attracting and providing for our visitors as well as our residents. And again, in some cases, one can characterize it as a more expansive view of how dollars can be allocated from some of these funds than has been the case in the past. Now, whether you want to characterize that as, there are some other respects in which you may be a more conservative approach we've taken, because I made the decision that there wasn't as good a case to be made because there wasn't kind of the sufficiently broad enabling language.
No, again, I applaud. I'm on the exact same page as you are, Mr. Mayor, and you are, Ms. Treasurer. I'm just thinking about the audit process and making sure we've got a rationale, even if it's different from the past.
Sure.
That we've got it, and we can say this is why we did this, and this is why we're moving money. So it's all great. I'm just trying to get a little bit deeper and thinking with an audit hat on.
And you, I think, were the recipient of one of the memos that kind of outlined or referenced various different sources of authority with regard to some of these issues. So my belief is that there is a very rational, reasonable basis for the position taken in each and every instance. A more than defensible one.
And I apologize if this is in there and I overread it. It's a little small number, but in the beverage permits, it's all transferred to the capital fund. I didn't see where the revenue line was in the general budget. Is it embedded in something else, or?
So it's in others.
It's in others, okay.
Yes, in a summary page, it's in others, because it's such a small.
Yeah, okay, that's perfect. And I think that's So, I'm sorry, one more. Under the Arts Council Fund, there's a line item for Arts Council, $118,000 budgeted as an expense.
So,
There's no detail.
so, yes, so the detail is, you're talking about, so we haven't broken down as a arts council and cultural events. And there is a number of events in both categories. And the only difference from what it was last year, they requested an increase this year of, I can't remember what was the increase, but.
It was it's a little over 20,000. It was an 8%.
22,000.
8%.
It was 22, it came out to 22,000. So there is no detail because the detail is all the events and what it entails, the artist cost, the venue cost,
Well, there's a cultural events line for $204,000, and then there's just an arts council line for 118.
What page are you on again?
The next to last page.
Yeah, so you're asking why it's broken down like this? Or?
I was just wondering what the detail was around what is arts council, $118,000. What is that? You got payroll.
So this is number, yeah, so like I said, this number, so it's going to be, and I apologize, I don't know, but they have, let's say, 15 events. So 15 events are going into one number, the arts council, and then the cultural events is another 10 events that they're going to have.
So they distinguish between art events and
Why have we
cultural
divided
events.
them up like that?
So in the past, how it was justified, so cultural events were funded from tourism-related revenues, and they were bringing more people from tourists from 50 miles.
And cultural
Arts
events are
Council were
specifically
smaller,
linked
smaller events, more organized, more towards the residents, and they were funded from general fund.
Okay.
We have changed that this year. So the full cost of the Arts Council events were funded, we're gonna request, or we're gonna fund it from SATEX.
Yeah, it is the Arts and Cultural Events Council.
Yes.
And the one thing I would note is reflected in the memo that I sent, it is that visitors are defined who's anybody whose primary home is more than 50 miles away. Vast majority of people coming to this island,
Homeowners.
including homeowners, property owners, are defined as visitors under the state accommodations tax statute. So the idea, and by the way, there is no actual requirement. Now, it may be as part of the, I don't know what the Tourism Expenditure Review Committee looks at as to, whether they assess the percentage of visitors at any given event. But in the state accommodations tax, for example, the 100% of the cost of a civic or cultural facility can be allocated to state accommodations tax, and there is no requirement that you measure that the utility of that facility is. The idea is it inherently helps attract and provide for visitors.
I think, just in the interest of time, that's all my big questions. I think anything else we can take offline. But again, this is super answers to my questions. That all makes sense to me. I'm just thinking about it with that audit hat on. And we're changing some big numbers from one category to the
sure.
other. So we just want to make sure we've got our ducks in a row. So thank you very much for your patience with me.
Thank you.
And asking these
Anything
questions.
else?
And again, Mr. Chairman, the idea is this comes for first reading at the next council meeting at the beginning of May.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other, am I torturing everybody?
That's good stuff.
If no other old business discussion, we can move on to new business. All right, let's move. Review and approval of the 2025 Air Med Care contract extension, tab 3 in your books.
Yes, I'll take
Do we have any
this.
discussion first, or?
This comes as a recommendation from the Public Safety Committee, and I have a representative here to answer any questions, and I can answer any.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the 2025 Air Med Care contract extension as recommended by the Public Safety Committee.
Second.
Discussion?
The one thing that I would note and commend our representative from Air Med Care as well as the staff working through, there's been an unfortunate, you may have the data, it doesn't seem that there have been, at least I'm not aware, there's been a strong uptake in the additional coverage on the part of Kiowa Island residents. You may actually have the data so that you get, as a Kiowa resident, you've got Air Med coverage, Kiowa Island, but you have the ability for what has previously been $35 a year, I think it's now $55 a year, unless you're a senior, it's $45 a year, to extend that coverage to other participating states. I don't believe there's been a substantial uptake in that previously.
Would you come up to them?
I'm sorry, if you can state your name for the record.
Yeah, so Keith Davis with Air Med Care. I mean, I can't speak to a lot of specific numbers, but I can say that I have a steady supply of calls monthly, just one at a time, of individuals wanting to extend to a full membership.
Okay. Well, one of the issues that it was that previously, if you had gone onto our website and clicked here for the additional coverage, it's the best way to characterize it, it was actually confusing as to what you were signing up and what the cost associated with that is. There have now been some more recent changes. You go online and it's a much more, there's a lot more clarity about the process of additional coverage, and I think we should try to encourage, and we certainly do that at the meeting this afternoon, residents to take advantage of what is essentially very, very low-cost insurance coverage for air transport if you're away from Kiowa Island.
Mr. Davis, what does, when you upgrade, what does full household membership mean? Is that family members only, or does it include guests?
It covers everyone that considers that address their primary address. It gets a little bit confusing in that, like, as an example, perhaps a story would explain it better. I had a call yesterday from a family who actually lives here part-time, but they consider their primary address in Philadelphia. And so they have other residents that live with them in Philadelphia. And if that's what they consider their primary, so the regular membership that you provide covers them when they're here. But when they're in Philadelphia, if they were to extend the membership, the additional family member that also lives in Philadelphia in their house is now covered as well. Because we go by everyone that lives at a residence, regardless of the number.
So it doesn't mean I'm a resident here and I have a son who lives in New York and this is my primary residence. It doesn't mean coverage for him and his
No,
family.
unless he lives with you here. Whatever you state as your primary residence, it's everyone that lives at that address.
Basically what their driver's license says.
Yes and no, because people don't update their driver's license all the time. And so we look for verification based on, like, where do you vote? Or if you're not an adult, if you're not of voting age, you know, is there any mail coming? You know, that sort of thing. You know, are you still a dependent? You know, we look for other verification.
I'm sorry for being so dense. I'm still not getting it. So my wife and I live here.
Mm-hmm.
We get the coverage automatically.
Yes. That covers you if you're picked up here on Key
Without the
Island.
$45 payment.
Yeah.
For senior. We get full coverage without that payment.
Yep. Well, you get, yes, so with the $45 payment, you are now covered nationwide.
Is it
So it's-
nationwide or is it, they're not,
Well, there are a couple of states we don't fly in, so, yes.
but it would be for you and Linda if you were in
In New York,
Colorado, and Colorado
Mm-hmm.
happened to be covered, you had a skiing accident or something like that, and you needed airlift, it would cover either you or her.
So it's extending my coverage, not extending the coverage of my family.
Correct.
Okay, sorry for being so dense about
And
that.
if I understand it right, if your son's here visiting and needs it while he's here, then if he's on Kiowa,
No, because he's not a resident.
okay, so it's only for residents, it's not for any visitors?
If he were your son living with you here, then he would be
Then
covered.
yes,
So vacationers aren't covered by this?
Vacationers and visitors are not covered.
correct.
Okay, that's, all right.
Question, so based on what Councilmember Spencer said, his example, if you wanted your son covered, then he just gets the extended plan?
Well,
But if this is his full-time residence, though, I guess
he's
he could
automatically
not get an
covered
extended
if
plan.
this is his full-time residence.
he couldn't
If you
really-
want an additional family member that doesn't live here, they would need to buy their own membership.
Policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the only way that works before in your other example is when you have someone that lives here, but they may have, this is their second home, but their primary home or vice versa.
Correct.
Then they can get the extended plan on their other,
Yes,
Okay.
and that's where it gets a little bit tricky because this may be their secondary home and they don't consider this their primary residence. Even though they're only a part-time residence, they are still covered under what we call the municipal site plan for Kiwa Island. So they're still covered when they're here as, you know, an owner and a part-time resident. But yes, yeah, only with the extended plan. And it becomes important like if you have multiple homes, it becomes important which one you declare as your primary with us. The biggest thing is there are additional services that I'm not allowed to discuss here in South Carolina, but it's why you can purchase it. It's available to you. Just state legislature has said I'm not allowed to discuss it. But then those additional services are really tied into what is your primary address and what we can do for you. And so,
There are two components, I think people don't realize there are really kind of two separate component parts of this. One is the municipality has entered into this contract. And so we, the municipality, without any cost to the residents, you know, provides one level of coverage.
For the residents while they're here.
Yes. And there is a separate, you know, opportunity for residents to obtain low-cost nationwide coverage, lower cost than would otherwise be entailed by full membership cost.
Like Medicare,
That's what this is.
It's both.
Medicare and Medicare supplements?
This is both. We're approving the municipal contract as well as the fee has gone up. Is that-
yeah, we've had increases,
Yeah.
yes. You know, but the additional cost that we're making available to the residents if they want to expand, it has no real bearing on the municipal site plan. You're approving the municipal site plan, then we, as a company, extend to them the full benefit of a coast-to-coast coverage at a discounted price.
My question's more operational. So back in November, my wife got injured on the beach. EMS transported us downtown. I got 45 minutes to talk with EMS in the ambulance about, hey, how's this all work? And it sounds like it's either Charleston County or MUSC or somebody has helicopter evac also. And it sounded to me the way I understood it that if EMS can't respond in a timely manner or there's different criteria, they'll dispatch assets they have. Or are they dispatching your assets? And then is it EMS that triggers you coming, or is it a resident saying, hey, come get me? How does that
Yeah, a
work?
resident cannot reach us. It's only through 911 dispatch.
So that's the same thing they were discussing with me. is you-
And they are dispatching our assets.
Okay.
And we have, as of June, we added another base that can reach Kiwa Island, that is based in Orangeburg, that is connected. We have a partnership with MUSC. So it is another aircraft, connected with MUSC, but is primarily our asset.
So there's going to be, if I can follow up on that, there's going to be a helicopter pad, I think, on the roof of the new MUSC facility. Is that your asset that's landing there, residing there, or how does that?
Primarily, it is us.
Yeah.
There are other aircraft that are not us. The bulk of those aircraft can't reach here. They're coming from too far away to come here, then there. But they pick up somebody and will deliver them there.
I could see the Coast Guard doing that, for example.
Yeah. And oftentimes the Coast Guard, like let's say it's a cruise, because we don't have baskets to pick somebody up off the deck of a cruise ship, they will just get to shore, and then, but while in the air, they'll call us and we do a relay from close to shore.
So again, you may have answered this, but are there, like if somebody's wife is injured on the beach and EMS calls for a helicopter, are there competing services, or will you be the service that comes?
Not at this point. So we are the service that would come. And now there are 3 aircraft that are owned by us that can reach Kiwa. So if you got to the point that you needed a 4th aircraft, then there may be a competitive provider, our competitor, that would come and participate as well to evac patients.
So I'm thinking about Kiowa, huge canopy. Do you have predetermined landing spots that, like Night Heron Park or stuff like that?
There are predetermined landing zones that we have. I'm not privy to all of that. Those are our pilots and our operations team that coordinates where those landing zones are.
Spencer?
But yes.
Councilmember Spencer, those have been, the locations that they've landed is that at the resort, Night Heron Park, the golf courses, they've landed on Betsy Carson Parkway, and then we've also, right now in our open field, they can land, so.
Thanks. And so how does the person needing transport get from wherever they are to the landing spot?
Oftentimes just EMS and the ambulance will move them from wherever the accident happened to the landing zone.
So it's more the life-threatening situation that
Yeah.
requires the urgency of faster transport, not necessarily the availability of EMS.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions
No, thank
for
you.
Mr. Davis?
Thank you.
Any other discussion for the council? We have a motion and second in front of us. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
Chairman's report. The only thing I really want to just say again, I've been digging into the budget. My focus this week has been kind of the philosophical approach, not the numbers per se. So as I think about the audit committee, we can understand and be able to talk about why we're moving things around. Again, I think we're moving in the right direction with all the way we're triaging money and making sure it's spent most efficiently, especially from any of the A taxes. I like where that's going. I'd again like to ask the mayor to think about, since you present the budget, to think more about kind of that capital plan and the capital reserve as we go forward. And I know I'm working with you in developing a list of capital projects that'll go out over 5 to 10 years. So,
And we do. That will be part of the separate, for lack of a better term, reserve funding kind of study or analysis. To at least, we have a limited number of actual capital assets. But to understand what the replacement cost of each of those is, which one, what insurance coverage is provided, what exclusions, so we know our potential exposure in the event that this building was flooded, tornado, what have you. Same thing with the bridge, same thing with the roads. But that's kind of it.
okay. But and where I'm seeing the budget going, I really like what I'm seeing. And there's maybe 1 or 2 cost issues I'll take up at a later point, but all in all, it looks very good. So thank you very much for your work.
You're welcome.
Chairman.
Treasurer's report, Dorado?
Yes, so I have the 10 months or 8 months budget report. And just briefly want to mention, so our revenues as of end of February are at 10.8 million, which is about 4% or 424,000 higher than compared to last year, year to date. And they are 70% of the total budgeted revenues. All the revenues are going to be within the budget or exceeding the budget with the building permits from the special project that we haven't budgeted, and pretty much all the tourism-related revenues are gonna end the year over the budget. The expenditures are at 7.9 million and are about 20% or 1.3 million higher than last fiscal year through end of February, and they about 55% of the current year budget. Few items that pretty much contribute to that negative variance when compared to last year is the personnel cost, but it's because of the number of full-time equivalents, the deputy cost, and waste management. But I do project that we end the year within the budget. All the expenditures are going to be within the share budget or less. Any questions?
I did hear waste management costs went up.
So it went up from comparing to last year, but not what is budgeted because of the new contract.
Thanks. I was trying to be funny, so.
Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you, Dorado.
And we're going to have this Monday, coming Monday, we're going to have an audit committee meeting, and I'm going to start planning for a next year audit, and we'll report the discussion that will take place at the audit committee at the next Ways and Means.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Citizens' comments, committee members.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Spencer?
I just want to echo your comments. Thank you to everybody. It seems like everything's on a good trajectory, and thank you for all of your roles in this.
And with that, Stephanie, or that we're adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.